Okay, I'd like to introduce our speaker at this time. David Bacher has been the coordinator for the Merry Meeting Gleaners for the past 2 years and has more recently taken on the responsibility of being the food bank manager at Mid-Coast Hunger Pavilion. Before moving into the nonprofit world, he worked on local farms for 10 years. David's past experience in agriculture and current role managing the food bank gives him a broad perspective in the way that gleaning fits into our complicated food system. Today, using just a little bit of math, we're going to take a look at an alternative way to measure gleaning success that places consistency over total weights. We'll explore a simple equation and discuss structuring a gleaning program with this metric of success in mind. So over to you, David. Thank you.
Well, can everybody hear me okay? I don't know how to adjust the mic. Does that sound okay?
No.
No. Okay, how do you make it higher?
Kind of don't.
You can't make it higher. I have to get lower.
You take it off the stand.
Yeah.
Take it off the mic stand.
I just hold it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, now it's all flat.
It's stuck over here. All right. You hear me now. All right. I was gonna do the clap thing that Jonathan did, but now I can't do it. Two songs. There we go. I think we're ready. I've learned a lot from other speakers already. I think the other thing I appreciate about Jonathan is that his opening note was about humility, which I feel like as I went to give a talk and briefly felt like an imposter, wanted to start with a note of humility too, because a lot of things I'm going to talk about, they contain some of my opinions and biases based off of the program that I run that may not apply to yours. And some of the things, some of the conclusions I've come to are very specific to this world, and I've really only been involved in gleaning for 2 years. The vast majority of my experience is actually in agriculture, so I'm trying to bring that perspective. And just want to be careful of making broad stroke claims about like what is best for gleaning. All right, changing the gleaning equation. Next slide. All right. Okay. Here's a beautiful slide. Gleaning on one side and a beautiful equation on the other side. I'm probably one of the only people who thinks that this side is beautiful as well. So that's something I have to moderate. When I showed my wife this presentation, she was like, it's easy with the numbers. People like don't think like you. So, but kind of what I'm trying to do is find an alternative to measuring everything about just total pounds of gleaned produce, and still using some numbers, finding another way to measure our impact. And that's what this is going to be about, kind of the journey I've gone on with that. And I'm going to go quick with the math. It may not, this equation exists, you can learn about it, but I don't want to make it too much about math. I want to make it more so about how to achieve consistency in your program. So some stuff I might go through a little bit fast. All right. So this is a concept that I learned recently. It's an economic law called Goodhart's law. Came up with by an economist named Charles Goodhart in the 1970s. And it says when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. The real distinction here is between measure and target. I think it's important to measure our impact. It's important to measure things, but when it becomes the target, when it's how we evaluate people or how all incentives are structured, then people will corrupt it. So, example with nails, like if it's about a number of nails, you get a bunch of tiny nails. If it's about the weight of nails, you might just get a few huge nails. Next slide. An offshoot of this idea is the Cobra effect, or I believe it's perverse incentive. So not only can you make your program less effective by making your measure a target, you can actually get counterproductive results, at least the opposite. So the story here is in colonial India, the British government was worried about all the venomous cobras, so they put a bounty on dead cobras. And I think that worked for a while. People killed cobras and the population went down. But then people got smart and started breeding cobras. And once the British government found out about that, they canceled the bounty and never released the cobras because they're never going to breed cobras anymore because they weren't going to make any money. So since they were just measuring dead cobras, it actually created more cobras, and in the end, cobra population was higher. So that's kind of the grounding part of this. Well, let's not become cobra farmers as we measure our gleaning data. All right, next slide. All right, so now background of what I do, where I'm coming from. So I'm coming from Maine. The Merry Meeting Gleaners are our gleaning group. Merry Meeting is named after the Merry Meeting Bay, which is technically an inland delta, one of two in the world, created by the confluence of 6 rivers. It's a very generous bay in that it's where most of the farmers we work with get their irrigation from. It's also just everybody names everything in Maine after Merry Meeting Bay, so it gives its name to a lot of things. So Merry Meeting Gleaners were started in 2016 by the Merry Meeting Food Council. And it was very much early on, just like volunteer driven, no paid coordinator. The first year, they just gleaned at one farm repeatedly, named 6 River Farm, because of the 6 rivers that go into Merry Meeting Bay. And so just like an organic, very natural start for years. And then more recently, 2021, the Gleaners became part of the Mid-Coast Hunger Prevention. So that's my employer. That's why I'm able to be involved now. And we've done, for reasons of scale, resources, vans, having a paid coordinator, commercial kitchen space for processing, cooler and storage space. So since 2021, the Gleaners pretty much became part of the organization where they were already delivering most of their produce to. Thanks. All right, the mission of the Merry Meeting Gleaners. I should include this because that's part of it. And then I realized I can't find a mission. We don't have a mission. So we're gonna work on figuring that out a little bit today. Let's see, this is where animation comes into play, I think. What happens when you click? Yeah, so just kind of playing with all these ideas of what our goals are. And click again. So our mission is unraised. There's all these things I'm kind of considering, like all these things we want to do, but like what are we focusing on? Next slide. All right, so that's the organization. Now just a little bit about my background. Pretty much just a decade of agriculture before gleaning. 6 River Farm, a farm where the Merry Meeting Gleaners had a monogamous relationship for a year. I was working there. That's where I saw these volunteers come to glean, and I was like, I want to be a gleaner when I grow up. And I didn't know that it was actually going to happen, but it was my first. I think I was there for 3 years, and you kind of saw the same process for almost everybody who works there. No one is fully ready, I feel like, for starting out on a farm and seeing the surplus, even of a well-run farm. Early on, it kind of shocks you a little bit. And then as you work there longer, you kind of become accustomed to it. And then the next round of employees comes in the next year, and you're actually the person who tells them, like, don't worry about it. I worked with a guy, he after work went and scoured the field edges for all the big zucchinis we threw away, and he brought them to Portland to give to homeless people, which, like, I understand it, but it's also like there's a lot that's wrong with that approach too, or like that's just not totally understanding the other structures that are out there. But it's also just comes from a place that I think we all start from when we're first on a farm and see that there's this inevitable surplus. Going from 6 River, oh, sorry, accidental click first. Let me go back to, yeah. I met my wife at 6 River Farm. Oh, we're running out. Sorry, one more.
There we go.
Yeah, thank you. I didn't make this easy. I met my wife at Six River Farm and she was starting a cut flower farm, and so that's what we did together for 5 years. She still does that. And it's kind of just another way to see surplus and overproduction, not food, but we had some years, especially dry years, where we were selling every single flower stem, so that was good, but it was also like so much worse than not having any margin. So we would just be like scrambling to sell every flower we could grow. And so just give you a little bit different perspective on it, like if we had 20% more and 5% of that was wasted or something, like that would have been a much better year for us. We had kids. One of us had to get a day job with like hourly pay, so then I went and worked for Harvest Tide Organics, and just I was entirely on a tractor. So this was like kind of my final relationship with like on farm surplus, waste, what do you want to call it? Like, it's pretty much I would make all the beds, you know, but then I would also, everything that did not get picked, I would see it because I would mow it, and then I would till it under. So I pretty much everything that didn't get harvested, I saw. I don't know if these videos gonna work or not. I take a lot of videos, at least when I did, Quest access.
No.
I deny access. I don't know if I can.
Do you want me to try?
Would I get like an email that said? Oops.
It'll do a lot of stuff.
Yeah, well, might not, it's not actually that important to what we're doing here. Yeah. It's just a video of me mowing down brassicas from point of view. I would take a lot of videos for my kids of things I was doing on the tractor. And this particular video is like a bunch of flowering brassicas and bees are flying all around. And so yeah, it was just kind of just the next step in trying to understand like how much food should farms be growing, how much overproduction is necessary, and really seeing every little bit from like a 30-acre farm that was not being used. All right, next slide after that exciting one. And then I became the coordinator of the Merry Meeting Gleaners. It was like my move out of agriculture. I did that for 2 years, and then just in the last year, I took over managing the food bank for Midcoast Hunger Prevention as well. So for a while it was just gleaning. Now I'm doing gleaning and the whole, like all the retail relationships, all the warehouse management, and trying to make gleaning a really complementary part of everything we're doing. So blocks there, but I don't honestly totally understand this chart, but it's just giving you an idea of like moving from just being a gleaning coordinator to the food bank manager. Now I not only dealing with getting food from farms, I'm getting food from Trader Joe's, Shaw's, Walmart, Target, Big Lots. Good Shepherd Food Bank is our partner agency. It's the big food bank in Maine. There's the USDA dry goods. A lot of what I do now is non-local food, but it makes me think more about how to have the local food just really fit into the flow, because it never exists on its own. All right, the next slide. And so I think a lot about just like the boom bust and in between of the produce we bring in. And this is just a slide of a bunch of pictures of produce. So some things like pears we got all at once and then never again. Some things like eggplant or cauliflower we barely get. This was a scallion glean where if we wanted, we could have had all those scallions. So, but we didn't. So there's some crops that we just so badly want more. There's some that we get in these crazy totals once and then never again. And then some come in steadily. And so the other thing that I do in my role is I purchase produce. So we do not make these decisions weekly though about what we're buying. We actually, at the beginning of the season, sign an agreement with farms where we map out the whole year. So I try to use data from glean data from the last year to figure out what I need to buy and how much. So next slide. This is a very hypothetical version of how I would do this. So very oversimplified, say. Gleaning last summer, we got 8,000 pounds of zucchini, 500 pounds of corn, 3,000 pounds of cucumbers, 3,000 pounds of broccoli. This is over 10 weeks, there's gonna be 2 more bullets, you do both of them. And say, in the simple world, I knew that I needed 300 pounds of each a week. And I decide which crop should I buy. Obviously, I'm not gonna buy zucchini, that's way more than 300 pounds a week. We gotta cover corn, let's buy it, people love corn and we're way under 300 pounds a week. But cucumbers and broccoli were exactly at 300 pounds a week, so. Should I buy both of them, should I buy neither, should I buy one? And really to figure this out, and you figure out how consistently we actually have it, not just the total. So I break it down by week on the next slide. Again, these numbers are made up, but, and look at that, cucumbers, we get them every week between 100 and 600 pounds, and broccoli, for some reason, we just had some farm drop off broccoli at a couple of random times, so. What these numbers tell me is that we reliably provide cucumbers to the people we're trying to feed. You cannot trust us to supply broccoli, even though we bring in just as much. Very rarely, and you could process and freezing maybe, but very rarely are we hitting our target for broccoli. So my argument in this situation, I would buy broccoli. I would not buy, maybe not 300 pounds a week, maybe a little bit less, and I would not buy cucumbers. So that's kind of the logic of this all, is kind of like. People eat consistently, we want to be consistent for the people we're serving. And I want data that helps me make decisions based off of that. There might be a couple other things, oh yeah. So I found, again, kind of an obvious example, but the numbers I'm actually dealing with to make these decisions are over much more than 10 weeks. They are things of very different weights, different values, and the numbers aren't so clean. So this is my new love. This is the equation that I use to determine how consistent we are of getting any given crop or of just bringing in produce in general. And I'm going to go through this. I'm not a teacher and I don't want to bore people, but pretty much it's called the coefficient of variation, CV. It's the standard deviation divided by the mean times 100. So a bunch of things are in quality. So essentially what it's useful for comparing relative variability of different data sets, like we did with the broccoli and the cucumbers. It's unit free and scale free, so you can compare anything. You could compare, they don't have to both be in pounds. You can compare the consistency of your volunteer signups with the number of potatoes you get, because it is unit free and it's even like large scale things can be compared to small scale things. All right, next slide. So standard deviation is essentially how closely your data clusters around the mean. So if you have 3 people who are the age 30, the standard deviation is 0 because it's clustered exactly at the mean. If you have someone who's 20, someone who's 30, someone who's 40, I think your standard deviation would be 10. So your number is going up as your data set has more variability. The mean we know. So by dividing standard deviation by mean and multiplying by 100, you essentially get a percentage of how much variability you have in your data set. Generally speaking, the higher the percentage, the less reliable you are at producing that thing. So the higher percentage is, to me, less desirable. So on Google Sheets, these are the formulas that you would do. Standard deviation of the data set, the mean of the data set, divide the one by the other, multiply by 100, you get a percentage. So going back to our easy and obvious example on the next slide of the cucumbers, in this case, the standard deviation is 170, the mean is 300, as we know. Divide them. Our CV is 56%. On its own, it doesn't mean anything. It's just a number. It's a number for comparing data. So on its own, that doesn't actually tell you anything unless you compare it to the next one, which is broccoli, which we'll same average, a much higher standard deviation, so it's pretty much twice as inconsistent or variable. All right, let's do a little, so this is where I start to think of just leaning weights as our way of measuring success. Generally, as just a single number, it's not correlated with the demand, the way the recurrences at which people are looking to receive food. It doesn't represent the boom and the bust, the times that you're scrambling for food or scrambling to deal with the food that you have. And just looking at gleaning weight as your target, there's cobra effects, I would think. We did a glean where we harvested some sweet potato vines, mostly to help the farm like clear the vines that they need out of their pathways, and we took some back, but that's the truckload of stuff that I said we didn't want. Because we could have brought that all back, and he just composted the farmer. We could have brought that all back, but I think it would be getting us further away from our goals of feeding people. Or I didn't take that picture, but we could be like, let's go harvest a bunch of blue hover squash. It's gonna help our weights, but this is not very useful. Or like yesterday when we were picking rocks, we could have weighed those and been like, wow, look at our impact. But so, all right, next slide. It's a little bit more math, just to like drive home how to compare data sets with this. So 2 hypotheticals. So early on, I came to this revelation or whatever by trying to look at specific crops. But then I was like, oh, this is how I want to look at my week to week gleaning data. And you could do this from month to month, year to year, but my suggestion is to do it on the recurrence in which you're trying to serve people. So we're trying to serve other organizations and our guests on a weekly basis. So that's the consistency I care about. Year to year consistency is less important. And so 2 hypothetical data sets that don't look that different. They're the same total. So if we just go through the slide, the same average, 1,000 pounds of clean produce a week, but a pretty different standard deviation, even though it's not that obvious looking at the data. So again, one of these to me is like the gleaning operation that is like twice as reliable. I think it would be easier to run. I think it's probably feeding more people. This is where some of my like opinions and some leaps come in, but I think with this 8,000 pounds, they're likely wasting less of this off farm. They're having an easier time recruiting volunteers, and they're probably feeding more people within that same amount of food. All right, one more for comparing data. You could feel like if the goal is just to be consistent, then maybe like stay small, like don't take on more opportunities, like get 10 pounds a week and then like, look how consistent we are. But this formula, since you're dividing by the mean, it actually gives you a lot of credit for scaling. So these are 2 data sets where they're the same, except I just added 1,000 to every point on the right. So the standard deviation is the exact same because it varies more or less by 200 or so pounds a week. The average is so different, so then your CV is way different. This organization is just has a way bigger impact. So scale has a role in this. So kind of my point in general is as you scale, you don't need to be bringing this number down, but or don't scale and grow this number because you're probably creating chaos and food waste, off-farm food waste. All right, what did I have next? Oh, and this is real data, just from a very small sample size of each year. So in 2022, our organization, 26,000 pounds these are over 15 weeks. That was the CV of just our gleaning week to week. The following year, my first year, I came on and brought us down 6,000 pounds. For anyone else in New England, like rainiest summer ever? Yeah. But we got a little more consistent. And then as I started to think about this stuff, we went up 8,000 pounds this summer and we got super consistent. So I believe the implications of a low CV are that you're kind of finding that middle ground between boom and bust. I think it's way easier to recruit volunteers. You're more reliable for the hunger relief organizations you deliver to. And I believe that you're limiting the food you waste off the farm. You lessen communication demands to like make things happen. And then this might be a negative, it's a little more boring. It's a little bit more like, part of the reason I got into Gleaning, I thought it'd be fun to like organize stuff, but like, this is a little bit more of a boring way to go. Next slide. And I do believe and I've seen this happen, there's a bit of a positive feedback loop that ends up happening. The more reliable you get with procuring produce from your farms, the easier it is to recruit volunteers to do that. More volunteers you have, more reliably you can get produce. And so not only do these things feed into each other, it kind of spins and it spins up, because then you also start getting more produce, more volunteers, more reliable. I have one farm as an example where this is happening. Then next slide, high CV implications. I think there's a lot of scrambling, inefficiency, communication driving. It's hard to find volunteers. I have a lot of trouble like getting volunteers to do things next day or unexpected. Sometimes you can deliver stuff to a pantry or a food bank, and like it's just too much, it's not expected, like we haven't heard from you in a month, and now you're here with this. And I think you can waste a lot of food off. But it might be fun, it might be cool, like it's like these events that you organize, I think there's like a place for it, but it's hard to build a program off of it. So how do we do it? How do we get consistent? So my argument is everything runs on a schedule. The volunteers, I've learned this from managing volunteers. Volunteer signs up for a shift and then they say, sign me up for this shift for the next 26 weeks at this time. This is generalization, but we have like 300 some volunteers in our organization, and this is what they're looking to do. Very few of them are looking to find different shifts every week. They're trying to find their shift at a time. Also for my food distribution sites, if you can deliver at the same time every week, I'll appreciate that. And then from my experience of being a farmer, I think there is variability. There are these elements of farming, but farmers have had to like kind of smooth the edges off that, and they run on schedules pretty much as anyone else. Maybe like big like commodity farms less so, but like diversified farms they have markets on given days, they do deliveries on specific days, and so once you get on a schedule with them, and they will figure out how to glean weekly. So we have a schedule. I can tell you what days we will be going to Six River Farm in August, or Warrenton Farm in September. Like I can talk to a volunteer about that now. I can talk to the farmer about that now. And it takes some growing pains, but they learn that schedule. It helps that they're diversified farms, and pretty much we're barely ever going to a farm and just harvesting one day. Once you get on a schedule, they start to learn to scout the day ahead of time, and then it's not just like the sweet potato glean, it's like a list of 4 things. Almost every glean we go on, it's like 3 to 6 different things that we're harvesting, and we're doing it weekly. All right, next slide. It's taking longer than I thought. So other ways to do it is just know the weekly flow of your farm. I had an advantage with 2 of our 3 biggest farms I worked for, so I like knew their schedule and kind of knew their pinch points, but just defer to their schedule. Encourage them gently to delegate to their managers, because it's hard for the farmer, they wear all the hats to like be scouting for gleaning too, and it's also really enriching for like a non-owner of the farm to like play this role in hunger relief. I see it really rounds out the job for some people. So using Harvest Tide as an example, again, I worked for Harvest Tide right before this job, but I knew from working there that they packed CSAs Wednesdays and Thursdays, and then Friday was their catch-up day. The schedule I inherited was that we glean there on Thursdays, and they were like, we'll do it like every other week. And like my first year, they would forget a lot, and then I realized like, when works best for you? Obviously Fridays, right? And so we changed to Fridays, and with that change, they were willing to go every week. And so 2023, that was the way we did. 2024, that was the way we did. Twice as many harvests, the yield was 3 times higher. So that's that like positive feedback loop of like they were learning how to get on this, like the schedule helped them, to help me recruit volunteers, and it just like, by the end, they were like, I mean, just the transformation within the season was incredible, so they're kind of like my case study on this unproven theory. Next slide. Another thing that I did that I think helped in the last year, that these are 4 farms that we had not worked with before, who are all pretty small. And as you all probably know, it's harder to get on a schedule with a small farm because it's not guaranteed that they're gonna have extra, so. An advantage we have in the area I'm in is most of the farms are pretty close together. So I set up a donation route, with these 4 farms. Pretty much every Sunday, they got an email and they could either opt in or out for the route that was going on the next day. 2 of these farms did it almost every week. One of them did it twice, one of them somewhere in between, but it was always worth our while to go out and. You know, you can use this CV equation to measure, again, crop specific, gleaning, but you can also use it to like compare your farms and be like, which ones are giving us produce in the most consistent way. And this, not one farm, but was the most consistent shift we had. Because we were taking 4 farms and aggregating, and it was just super reliable. It was not gleaning, it was donation, which generally works well for smaller farms. Next slide. This is where I feel like a bad person, but I'm wary of the pop-up gleaning. I'm not against it, but it's generally one crop. It's generally high complexity because you don't get a lot of notice, and then you just need to like communicate with a bunch of people to try to make it happen. And in my experience, that's where we waste the most, is when we like, those are Brussels sprouts, and we were harvesting the tops, not like the top Brussels sprouts to get them to sprout up, and they're essentially collard greens on top. So we did a lot of those, and you know, it was hard to use all of them. So my argument is not saying no, but like use it as an opportunity to build the relationship with the farm and like show that you can get to them, that you can do this, and to just like build volunteer relationships, tell your narrative, whatever. But if this was our model, like seeking pop-up gleans, I think we'd be a lot less effective. Next slide. And then another thing that I've kind of tried to cultivate is turning farmers into gleaners, which again, I think the longer the trust is built and whatnot, the more that happens. And having gleaners who don't necessarily, oh, did I not finish right now? Oh, gleaners who don't. So be a good partner to farms. It helps that we're able to purchase from farms, and I try to buy more from the farms that donate more. Explore just using some of their resources as you build that trust. This was a sweet potato glean we did at Harvest Tide. When you harvest sweet potatoes, they are not cured, and we're not well set up to cure them. They stored them for us and cured them, and then we went and just pulled from their shipping container weekly. So being able to use some of the resources they already have. I think the biggest thing, and this comes down to what the resources you have, is don't expect farms to deliver. You gotta offer to go to them. But if you do, they might just load you up with a tractor. And then it really, the learning experience for me in this job is like, because I thought gleaning was the most like desirable volunteer activity. But since I'm in this bigger organization, it's hard to get new gleaners. We're still reliant on a lot of the original gleaners. And but what I found was incredibly easy was to get people to handle gleaned produce. There's a lot of questions that come up with someone who hasn't gleaned before, and like they're valid questions of like, where do I park? Will there be a bathroom? I'm like, yeah, maybe. And like, just like, what are we doing? Like, will you be there? I know, maybe not. So like, but this shift that I start, like the gleaning sorting shift, it's like they know where it's gonna be, they know I'm gonna be there, like they know like where the bat, and then they just like get this agency from it. And I've had like so many people who want to do it. It's almost a little frustrating. It's like I wish you would come glean, but I've tried to push this model more and more of like having farmers donate as long as we can go to them, doing a little bit less of the harvest ourselves, and really just understanding what we're good at. We're good at doing the value added steps, distributing, aggregating. And I think it's that kind of stuff, like bunching, bagging, quality control. I think that's where you limit your off-farm food waste. I think that's the step that like makes it so that the farm that you already put the energy into is actually gonna like find a home where it's, because I think. Yeah, just scrambling to get it out of the field, it could become waste in another place. So I think this step is really important. All right, next slide. I'm done at 3:10, right?
Yeah.
Cool. I put in a bunch of extra slides that I knew I wasn't gonna get to. So then just don't go overboard, like the measure becoming a target could happen with this equation too, like. Use it to kind of measure your progress, but don't use it as your target. I mean, because it could have its own cobra effects, just of saying no all the time to things that were like outside. We're not denying new opportunities that could become helpful over time, because you reduce your scale and generally just feeding fewer people. So returning to the mission of all these things of like, what is our mission? You know, again, this feels not that fun, but I've eliminated fun as an option because I think we can get fun without like making it the goal. And I feel the same way about reducing food waste. I've realized that if we go in with the mindset that our goal is to reduce food waste, I think we're less effective than if we just focus on community, people, food, and I think we reduce the food waste in the process. But the mission is still unwritten, so this is just me brainstorming still. Yeah. So. Yeah, this is kind of just, so I just had to decide that I don't explicitly prioritize. Like. When we go to a farm, I'm trying to keep it about people and feeding people, because I think especially with new gleaners, if it's about reducing food waste, sometimes they lose. The decision making gets worse, and we lack the scale, the skills sometimes, and if we focus on food, on people. I think it's just a side effect of what, the food waste is a side effect of what we do, and we can tell people that we do it. But I think it's important, especially with new volunteers, not to start with that. All right, is there any other things I want to say? Yeah, because I think that's where a lot of potential like cobra effects come in. I think if you're just trying to reduce what gets wasted on the farm, quality, variety of produce can go down. Dignity of like, again, like the large. Filling up the trunk of your car and driving to Portland and opening it and telling homeless people to dig it, that is not dignified. So like, not that that's what anyone here is doing, but reducing efficiency, and then I think the big one is turning on-farm food waste into off-farm food waste. I think that's the biggest potential cobra effect of trying to measure, of just looking at it from a reducing food waste kind of way. And let's just skip to my last slide now. Yeah, that's Jonathan had that in his, the gleaners photo. I had one that looked kind of like it. But anyway, my point is, I didn't even try to recreate it. I think there was a lot of numbers here, but I think the point, I believe this number, if it's possible, is kind of closer to being about people. Because I think everything about being consistent keeps us in line with the fact that we are trying to be effective for feeding people and for supplying hunger relief organizations and for recruiting volunteers. I don't think that this number, the CV, if you want to like play around with it, I don't think it goes in grants. I don't think it probably goes in storytelling. It's kind of, I think if you look at it, you will just see the way it kind of benefits everything else and helps you grow in like a way that like very sustainable and thinking about the people you're serving. So that's what I got. Any questions? Yeah.
If you look at like a scale of weeks, does this work like on a scale of like years, you know, like thinking like, well, sometimes go out and do like a pumpkin harvest and that'll like, you know, after being outside, it's interesting and for like 6 months, suddenly we get like 30,000 pounds of food in. But if it's consistent year over year, like to the point where we build a really farm,
Yeah.
and it place, that kind of.
Yeah, I think that can definitely play a role as well, and as you're growing your organization, and that's why like this is not perfect in the sense of like. A late season like sweet potato glean that we've got the opportunity to do that would hurt this percentage if this was our target. Is actually, it makes a lot of sense to do, because we can store them, we can process them, like there's all these other factors that come in, it's why like. It should never become like your only North Star, but yeah, I think it can work for any recurrence, we just prefer a week because. I wanna go to each farm, I wanna go to every week. Everybody we deliver to, I'm trying to deliver to every week, and I'm trying to have the same volunteers show up every week, so, that's why. But it's a little more arduous in terms of like data, like, because you need to have your data broken up by week, so. Yeah. Well, thank you.